Bear with me as I catch my breath for just a moment. Been a crazy, crazy week here in La Prave. Anyone who's had a pulse, who's been following the news, has seen that national outrage has come home to Providence. And while we contemplate Christmas and the just recently passed Thanksgiving, we have to say to ourselves, are some of these issues, these salient issues, do they belong here on the table for discussion, here as part of the Providence political scene? And of course I say yes, because the root issues of Ferguson, of Cleveland, of New York City, et al., well, they aren't rooted just in those cities. The same type of injustice, the same type of tension and conflict have seen themselves arise many times here in local recent political history. Just this week, we were treated to yet more outrages from folks involved in the first responding community, whether it be the Pawtucket Police Department. We continue to watch with some amusement and some disgust and some loathing the travails of the various Coventry fire systems. We're recently off multiple cases of police abuse in cities like North Providence, where we treated to the specter of a police chief chasing a stripper, where on this very building, one Vincent A. Buddy Cianci recently uttered the immortal words, I believe it was just last year, if you need cocaine, dial 911. Just a few years ago, the assistant to the then mayor, his girlfriend, the mayor's assistant's boyfriend, ultimately was convicted of basically running a drug ring out of the Providence City Police Department, while at the same time a particularly vicious rape occurred in the Providence Police substation. So ultimately, the question is this just a national issue, or do we bring it home? We're also treated this week to the specter of Lieutenant Governor Chafee, as I call him, because he's certainly not the real governor. You can't, as this past 4 years have been just a quick, particularly vicious dream, attempting to elevate the salaries of the folks in Rhode Island who've performed at their highest levels. Folks like, well, the Department of Motor Vehicles here in the state of Rhode Island. I mean, if I think of a governmental agency that just screams political and governmental efficiency, it's got to be the Department of Motor Vehicles. One wonders if, in fact, this gentleman, and I'll use that term loosely because I don't think he's a gentleman, he tends to act like one, may be the most tone-deaf, maybe the most incompetent governor in Rhode Island political history. The notion that at this point, given the type of issues that are facing the typical Rhode Island household, and when I say facing them, I mean literally staring them down at the eye at every dinner table in Rhode Island, whether it be underemployment, the specter of 20+% increases in utility costs, the notion of property tax foreclosure sales taking place all over the state, people losing their homes, continued underemployment for those people fortunate enough to cobble together some type of existence, to stare the average Rhode Islander in the eye and say, yes, your government officials need more money, is simply staggering. At what point in time do we accept here in Providence and in Rhode Island in general that government now sees the citizenry as nothing but a somewhat necessary inconvenience to justify and rationalize away their existence? That we continue to elevate this permanent, I'll call it superclass of citizenry here in Rhode Island to exaggerated pay scales, cradle to grave, whether it be medical care, vacations, sick time, cradle to grave benefits, at the expense of an increasingly marginalized and virtually non-existent middle class. As individuals across the state are caught in this vicious squeeze by supporting a safety net hopelessly out of control in this state. And when I say out of control, I mean overridden by bureaucracy, incompetence, and stupidity. One need only go to the Department of Labor and Training to see that first and foremost. I wonder what type of raises Herr Chafee is considering at last minute for them. one has to wonder if in fact this gentleman is in touch with reality. And does he loathe Gina Raimondo on such a political level that he is willing to hand her off such a bleep storm? Just sheer chaos. What is this man capable of? What other time bombs is he going to drop off in his last few days here as the idiot king of Rhode Island? Is it worth a call? You know, this week we're going to be discussing community activism. I would argue that there's been a tremendous amount of rhetoric disparaging community activists. What about all the community inactivists in this state? The people who just sit idly by, as my friend Charles would say, observing the slow lobster boil. Somehow identifying or attempting to identify under the guise of being pro-law and order with a group of individuals who run the state who may be at surface value law and order but have nothing to do with that. There's no connection between law and order, the rule of law, government for the people, and the group of criminals who run this state. No connection whatsoever. Let's go down the list. We've talked about Chafee. Let's talk about Lieutenant Governor Roberts. Her big claim to fame is this health care fiasco that she set up, essentially duplicating on the federal dime a health care administration and a bureaucracy that's been present in independent insurance agents for generations. Knowing full well that at some point in time, government largesse would run out and it would be up to the state of Rhode Island to pay for this additional bureaucracy. A bureaucracy so craven, so desperate to stay in business that they aggressively advertise across the state, hoping that somehow they can pull in enough money to continue their Ponzi scheme. So let's go down the list again. Attorney General Kilmartin. There's a special place in political hell for him. This week we were treated to the specter, I guess, of the, as John DePietro called it, coined the term major no-show. Again, these are the people that so many of the community inactivists want us to follow blindly. This naive belief that folks are going to do the right thing because they wear a badge or they wear a uniform or they occupy a potential position of political authority. That somehow that's elevated them to a special place. Well, the question, of course, the age-old question is, did he know or did he not know? Did the chief of police in the city of Pawtucket know that, in fact, the number 3 man, Major No-Show, was, in fact, a major no-show, making severe coin, big bank, at the expense of Pawtucket taxpayers, who, by the way, are slowly trying to emerge from just the weight of the civic pain that's been given them by generations of the Lynches et al., the Lynches, the Harwoods, the respective crime families that ran Pawtucket for many years. So, despite that, the chief either knew or didn't know. What's worse? And somehow, is this chief somehow able to stay in business, as we say, despite that? Why hasn't he been shown the plank? Why hasn't the entire department effectively been taken over by the state police? As if that's some type of eternal salvation for the taxpayers. An organization that was once looked upon as the noblest of the noble, the high and the mighty, the ethically pure, the era of the Walter Stones, who were the one source of truth and light in this state. Well, we know that's not exactly true. Ask a certain family of a certain assemblyman whose son didn't have to report for a DUI and a hit and run for 12 hours. Yeah. In the halls of justice, justice in the halls. But Kilmartin, who, point of pride, was a Pawtucket policeman, Pawtucket detective, went to law school, I believe, on the dime of either the state or the city of Pawtucket. Did he know or did he not know? And at what point in time do the people surrounding them in their immediate community, whether it be the Central Falls mayor's office, whether it be the Central Falls Police Department, who stood idly by while buildings were boarded up, whether it be in the case in the Bucket, where you've got a major no-show, or in the case of Coventry, where you've got fire departments gone wild. You know, it's the equivalent of spring break every day down in Coventry when folks can go golfing, have a couple of pops, and eventually, occasionally, take a time out for, as we say in my business, a 10-minute work break. For the next 10 minutes, everybody works. So at what point in time does the culture of corruption, the stank, emanate from all of the people involved? Because this behavior can't act in isolation. It's not a simple case of a couple of bad apples. No. And what we'll discuss later in the show is, in fact, this couple of bad apples actually corrupted the entire organizations, whether it be police injustice, police brutality, and some of the larger police departments across the country, like New York, like Cleveland, Ferguson, on a local, smaller level, so that people sit idly by and do nothing. They watch the chaos around them and are either too afraid or too complicit to get involved themselves. Are they worried that somehow they'll be thrown out, to be shown the door, or are they simply trying to get a piece of their own? Either way, we've got continued outright cases of either financial, ethical, spiritual collapse happening right here in Rhode Island. And as John DePietro on this station put it aptly, we've got criminal justice by journalism. If, in fact, it wasn't for the noble efforts of the White and the Hummels and the various members of the independent media literally outing these cases, would they just continue unabated? How ironic is it that some of the worst cases of this abuse take place in detective bureaus? Are they not seemingly able to be their own private internal Columbos? Oblivious to all that surrounds them while they're supposedly fighting for law, truth, and justice in the American way for the rest of us? The type of laser-like focus they have on the individual citizen and whatever problems that they face on a daily basis. The guy who owes a couple of traffic tickets, they seem to get them. The kid selling dime bags. Is there still such a thing as a dime bag? The kid selling dime bags on the street corner. They seem to be all over them. How about the guy in Staten Island, maybe or maybe not, selling some illegal smokes? Cigarettes. Who paid the ultimate price? And yet at the same time, that laser light, that's focus on all that is good and right and true about America, they can't extend to themselves. Is it fair to argue that in some cases, members of our police department, if they weren't in fact members of the police department, they'd be on the other side of the glass, dealing with other members of the police department? Is there a criminal element in the Rhode Island culture and in the Rhode Island political structure and the Rhode Island law enforcement so pervasive that, in fact, they are the problem? Do we as Rhode Island citizens need to turn inward and look at all of our elected officials as either active or complicit members of this era, this sort of culture of corruption, crime, and basic indecency? This week across the nation, we were treated to the specter of a militarized police ruthlessly stamping down any type of valid political civil disobedience. Where is that same effort when we look upon themselves? I don't know. It just doesn't seem to exist. Rhode Islanders everywhere this week cried about the inconvenience created by traffic jams. What if? Listen, folks. Christmas shopping at the mall creates those kind of traffic jams. Are you so afraid of being forced to turn inward and display some level of perspective on the issues yourself that you'll do nothing but cite, I don't know, some knee-jerk reaction to folks different from yourself who would protest what they see as common injustices in day-to-day Rhode Island society? Is that so difficult to imagine? Have we become so comfortable, so insular, so inward-looking, that as long as this doesn't interfere with Monday Night Football, Dancing with the Stars, whatever crap is on TV at this moment, is it more important to get home to that than be faced with obvious political injustice? You tell me. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 401-437-5000. We are the Coalition. Of course, you can find us